My name is Christopher Blomgren.
And my name is Josh Simpson, and welcome to episode 2 of the Food and Fantasy Podcast, the podcast where we discuss recipes and dishes from our favorite fantasy media and try to throw in a modern twist to them. In the last episode, we visited the kitchens of Westeros from the hugely popular book and HBO TV series Game of Thrones. For today's episode, we're going to sample the rustic Mandalorian cuisine from a kitchen far, far away. So this is an episode that I am actually looking forward to very much so.
Right. So for this, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about the famed Mandalorian warriors. This is part of the now Legends. I don't know what Disney decided to keep for their new happy canon. But I think there's a Mandalorian-esque type female in the Star Wars Rebels where she runs around with a pink helmet and a pink jetpack, and she likes to. Yeah, it's pink, and she has like a pink jetpack, and she likes to spray paint anti-imperial sentiments on walls. Yeah, it's kind of silly, but all of these recipes are coming from.
The expanded universe.
From the expanded universe, made famous by Karen Traviss, who wrote many of our favorite expanded universe novels. Many of them centering around Mandalorians themselves and the clones that they created, the Jango Fett clones.
And just a quick intro into the expanded universe for those of you listening or watching. That are unaware of what the expanded universe is. Expanded universe, very quickly, is just everything beyond the movies, the original movies. So I think the first book came out early 80s, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, but the first real book came out early 90s, 90...
You're referring to the Thrawn trilogy,
right?
The three books that were written by Timothy Zahn that kicked off a kind of a renaissance of expanded universe 2.0. I think so. I know the books, the original novel for Star Wars, or I should say, From the Adventures of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
The Star Wars came out in 1977. I want to say it came out before even the film came out. And the expanded universe always fit within the continuity of the films. So it was one unbroken timeline from 1977 to 2014.
Would that be considered the expanded universe, or is that?
It would be, yes, because there are certain concepts, characters, dialogue, and scenes that happened in the novel that did not happen in the film.
Oh, nice.
So it expanded on that universe before even the film came out. From there, then you get the Han Solo adventures.
Yeah.
You got the Lando Calrissian adventures, which are some really interesting titles, like the Starship of Thonboka, that type of stuff. As well as Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was the original script that George Lucas had written because Fox thought that Star Wars was going to be the biggest flop ever. Yeah,
and that's a really interesting read too. If anybody decides to go out and get it, it's a pretty short book. But from what I remember, Luke and Leia actually hook up in that.
Well, it's implied. It is implied. So with that, we're gonna jump ahead, getting into that after I'd say early 90s. So once the Thrawn trilogy came out, which was Heir to the Empire, Last Command, and Dark Force Rising, I believe was the middle one. A whole slew of books that came out after that, including comics and games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think there was a Bounty Hunter trilogy that had come out, and that was one of the first times that you actually heard we saw the word Mandalorian.
Yeah.
I think that's where Karen Traviss, and actually even before her, it was Kevin J. Anderson who wrote the Jedi Academy trilogy. He ended up doing the first comic for Dark Horse Comics, which was the Old Republic, where it got into the Sith Wars and the Great Hyperspace War, and he was the first one to really flesh out the warrior race of the Mandalorians and the Throg that came before them?
The Tong.
The Tong, that's what it is.
Taung.
Right.
Yeah. Which were this alien race that looked somewhat similar to, I guess, a predator, except they had a pointy sort of triangle.
You are one ugly mother.
Yeah. They had like a... Nice. They had kind of a triangle sort of head.
They do. They actually did look really predator-like.
Yeah.
With the sound that they make when they're cloaked.
Yeah.
And then I know that from that race, that's where they got the word Mandalore, which in their native language just meant like chief or leader.
Yeah.
And so then I guess they died out in just fighting war after war after war. And then so the humans and other sentient beings that followed that warrior armored tank type race, they kept the tradition going.
Yeah. So the Mandalorians going on through the canon of the expanded universe, they based their whole culture off of that culture.
Right.
And also just a quick side note, the Mandalorians, as you know, are big on their armor, and they've got similar to, for those that don't know, like Boba Fett has his T-visor helmet. That's how you know a Mandalorian coming along, is you see a T-visor.
Right. You see the T-visor, you see the heavy armor, you hear the jetpack, and then that's the last thing that you hear. Now, but with all that in mind, a warrior race is going to be very hungry after being on the battlefield all day.
Yes.
Warfare is thirsty business, and so to quench that thirst, we wanted to talk about the first bit of Mandalorian cuisine on the list. Josh, you want to go ahead and talk about that? The Netragal?
The Netragal is essentially a black ale.
The Netragal, or black ale, it's not like Guinness. I'm quoting Wikipedia here. It is a milk stout like Macassin, so it's sweeter, more fragrant, less alcohol content than Guinness, but it is considered to be a stout.
But
porter.
The interesting thing is, when I research on like a beer website, and you just say a black ale, the first thing that comes up is an IPA.
Interesting.
But when I think about it, I think of it similar to a Guinness, but sweeter. So you're going into more of like a Boddington sort of area,
like a cream lager type.
Yeah,
sure. So, but to represent that sticky, sweet, dark ale that the Mandalorians enjoy so much, we picked up a local brew called the Belching Beaver. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Let's see, it's Belching Beaver Brewery. We'll put a picture up.
Yeah.
I guess in there. See, it's called Beaver Milk, which is very innuendo. Milk Stout. Yeah. Belching Beaver Brewery here in Vista, California.
Nice. There you go.
So let's go ahead and let's crack this bad boy open. There you go, dude.
So when Chris makes that first pour, I guess we'll go ahead and talk about the color.
There we go. This is definitely a dark ale.
Just the way I like it.
This has a darker head to it, similar to an Imperial Stout, as opposed to like
an Imperial Stormtrooper?
An Imperial Stormtrooper Stout. Set that down there. Oh yeah, that is black. Cheers, may the force be with you. All right, let's give this a taste.
That's very good.
It's very smoky.
But it's got a bit of a sweetness to it.
Right, I can taste the chocolate in it. Very smooth. Dark beers like this they have a tendency to be, thick and syrupy, but this is crisp and refreshing.
It is.
This would get any Mondo very drunk. What do we have for our menu today? So typically we like to start out like for a full planned meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert.
So today we're going to go through a breakfast, and a dinner, and a dessert. Lunch we're going to kind of leave out. Lunch there. When I think about the Mandalorians, at least, I don't think of lunch as a necessity, because throughout the day they're going to be battling, they're going to be farming, they're going to be
waging war.
Exactly. So lunch is more of a time where you're going to find them with a piece of beef jerky or something similar. So
you always wondered about that. Like, speaking of the beef jerky, so I know there are a couple of animals. There's the Nerf that we hear, the scruffy looking Nerf herder, and then if you look deeper into expanded universe lore, you see that the Nerf is more like is actually like a cow type.
Yeah.
Cow horse. And so that's used as like beef.
Yeah.
The beef substitute, but then you also have the bantha where you get the milk from it, and I would imagine that they probably eat bantha as well. But I'd have to look to see if there's any, like, an actual pig. Like, are people going out and killing Gamorrean guards and cutting off, let me cut a piece of bacon off your back? Like, are we like, well, because remember, it's not really cannibalism anymore if you have multiple sentient species. So I mean, like, are you eating? Can you eat a Gamorrean? Like, can you smoke it? Smoked Gamorrean?
Well, yeah,
and it tastes like pig.
Yeah, of course you can.
Soy. That'd be a good spot to put that woman who does the pig calling competition. Soy, soy.
We have right there.
Right. Oh, I'm the woman that
Yes.
did the... Okay. So, what are we having for breakfast?
So for breakfast, the typical Mandalorian breakfast food would be something called Harshoon bread. And I think you can speak a little bit more about exactly what that is.
Sure. So the Harshoon bread, we looked it up both on Wikipedia and on some of the Mandalorian websites. I know there's a link to it from the 501st, from the Cosplay Society, where they've actually gone through and made several of these recipes in real life, in a kitchen close to home, I should say. The Harshoon bread is a pastry that's rolled out very, very thin, baked dry, and then later on it is rehydrated, I should say, by dipping it. Typically, as a MRE type ration, it would be dipped in water to rehydrate it.
Right.
But in the Order 66 novel, when they're getting ready to do like a wedding,
yeah,
one of the Mandalorians makes it, but then instead uses like some sort of sweet, so like a simple syrup or a honey, like a diluted honey.
That was actually I'm going to nerd out right now, but the wedding between Atane Tur Mercan and Darman, which is the clone trooper.
Right.
Who
one of the Skirata.
Yes, one of the Skirata clones. Of
course, Cal Skirata being
one of the Mandalorians that Jango Fett actually hired to help train all of those clone troopers.
Brought with him to Camino. Like the Forgotten.
Yeah, the Forgotten. There you go.
So, in looking at the word Harshoon, literally means see-through, and the reason why they roll it so thin is that during Mandalorian weddings, you should be able to see your wedding ring through the bread. Or through the dough, I should say. And so you have something that's similar to like I would say it's like phyllo dough. So you think like a baklava, where you do the layers and layers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear about the good news about the sky baklava?
Patton Oswalt reference.
This would be space baklava. Well, it would be sky baklava because they come from the sky. But anyway, so you would take the layers and layers of like the phyllo dough. You would bake it. You take it and then you roll it into like a what are those? The cake where you roll it
like a croissant.
Not like a croissant, but they have like the cake where it's the layers of the pastry, and then you put like the cream or the mousse filling, and then you roll it into like a circular loaf, almost like a tort.
Yeah. And
then you bake it dry. You bake it till it's nice and dry and crispy. I would imagine. Which sounds really, really good. So then if you're out in the field, you either dip it into you pour out your canteen into like a little dish or colander or something, like a trencher, and then you would dip the bread in there to rehydrate it, and then you would enjoy it like that. So that almost sounds very British, because British people love their soggy dessert type things.
Yes, they do. But
then for a more traditional at-home version of this dish, I would imagine you'd probably do it similar, like I said, again, to a rolled up baklava where you would put some sort of honey or drizzled sweetness to it.
Yeah,
dipping it into like a syrup.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind was phyllo dough, as you said. It gives you a super flaky crust,
right?
And you can buy it in the store that's pre-made. So all you have to do is kind of roll it out a little bit, and then roll it up in any way. So for the actual menu item that I thought about for this one, an apple strudel came to mind, using the phyllo dough as the main bread dough.
So you're saying, okay, so we take the listed menu item, which is the harchoon bread, and we're going to do a real life chefy kind of restauranty modern day twist to it. So meaning it's something akin that you would see a pastry chef doing in a restaurant.
Yeah. So essentially, what they would do is they'd roll out that phyllo dough, and before they add the ingredients, they would cook them. So you would take your apples, and you'd throw in some golden raisins, and you'd mix that with butter, because butter makes everything better.
Fat equals flavor.
Yes. You would cut the apples, in a small dice. Really, you can kind of cut them to whatever size you want.
Mm-hmm.
But usually with something like this, you might want to cut it really small to for it to cook a little bit faster,
mm-hmm.
and then also just to give you a lot more evenness in terms of the whole.
Are you like caramelizing this?
Yes. So when you cook it with the butter, you can add any sort of seasonings like cinnamon. Obviously, you want to add some
Spices.
sugar, maybe some brown sugar would be your best bet. And yeah, any sort of spices that you would want. For me, I generally go with the more simpler route with
mm-hmm.
my cooking.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from cinnamon and the sugar and the apples, and the butter, there's not much more that I would personally add.
Right.
But, by all means, if you're making something like this at home and you feel the need, then, to each is their own, I say. But
so a Mandalorian woman looks out her kitchen window, her space kitchen window, and as she's pulling the dampened cloth off of her harchoon dough,
yeah,
she's thinking about adding whatever apple equivalent, whatever kind of seasonings that she would want, or spices.
Yeah, and I've always considered myself somewhat of a Mandalorian, just because I've always found sort of a commonality between that whole sort of group of people. But when it comes to Mandalorian cuisine, they're also very similar in that it's not about the muss and fuss. It's about the simplicity and
very rustic.
Yeah.
It gets the job done. Stick to your gut kind of thing.
Right.
Sure. I always thought of it kind of like I would say like Scottish food, but like makes me think of Highlander kind of Viking.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is the Vikings. And if a Mandalorian saw this, he would kind of say, "Oh, you're adding golden raisins. That's that's a little too much for me. Maybe
that's something a Jedi, or how do they say it? That's something a Yetis
yeah,
would eat with his pinky raised high.
Yeah.
So we got our harchoon bread, and what are we gonna wash it down with for breakfast?
So we've got usually we'll stick with coffee, and in the Star Wars universe, it's no different. You've got calf,
as they call it.
Yeah. But in this case, we would do a spiced calf.
Spiced calf was a blend of calf that made use of spices to enhance the drink's flavor. There was a Uyabat cantina on Mandalore, located next to the planet's capital city of Keldabi, our favorite city.
Yeah.
That created this beverage. So typically, now for a breakfast blend where you're going to be using spices, again, like you said, like cinnamon, star anise, is that one?
Yeah, you can throw a little bit of that. With
Star anise?
Yes. With star anise, you generally don't want to put too much in because it might kind of overpower things a bit.
Right.
But with your calf, just a little bit of a hint of cinnamon, maybe a little bit of star anise would complement that apple strudel really well. Yeah, because again, you don't want it to overpower to the point where you're like, all I taste is cinnamon or all I taste is star anise.
Yeah. You still want to taste the bean.
Yeah, especially if you have a really, really good coffee, you definitely want that to be the prevalent flavor profile in your drink.
You got to wonder, like, in like an advanced civilization like that, they got faster than light travel spaceships. They have artificial intelligence droids talking to you. Like, you know, are they still using a French press, or do they have like their version of a Keurig? You know,
I'm sure.
I mean, you know, with all the technology around, I mean, you know,
I'm sure it's a droid of some sort that's
making, like, instead of a gonk droid, you have like a calf droid.
Yeah, exactly.
Gonk.
Gonk.
But
I had to do it.
A Tom Green reference. So, yeah, I always like to think about that, where you have even today, where you have all these new razors coming out and like all these different types of foams, and then you have this big push for people going back to safety razors and straight razors, you know, and using a traditional like shaving soap with a brush. So, you know, I guess what I'm getting at is with all this extra technology, do you think they have some sort of you know, techno means of brewing their calf, or do you think they go at it old school, traditional way, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
Yeah, if it's a Mandalorian making the coffee, you're going to have him taking a piece of wood or something, or her,
right?
Taking a piece of wood or rock,
yeah,
and grounding the beans and mixing that with hot water.
Oh man.
You're going to get grit. You're going to get grime.
True grit.
Yeah. So
okay. So we have our. That sounds good though. I mean, so it doesn't sound like a heavy breakfast. Just something light. You get the calf in the morning to kind of invigorate you, give you a shot of energy as you're putting on your armor.
Plus, along with all that sugar.
Yeah,
you're going to get that.
Give you that quick boost in order to make sure you're running your you're flipping those 3 magic buttons on the bridge of your ship. You know, you're making sure that you're refueled, getting ready to jump to hyperspace and go off to some front that you're a mercenary for, or you're going to go out and have a big day out in the field.
Oh yeah.
So you work all day, you fight all day, you war all day. It's time for dinner.
Yes, it is.
You know, the sun is set over Keldabi. The Mandal Motors shuts down for the day. The plant.
The Oyubat is still open though, by the way.
Right, and you know, it's Thursday evening. You're going in there and you're going to have. You've been working all day and you want something that's very hearty and robust that you can have for dinner. What are we having for dinner, Josh?
So there is a dish called a Billrat stew. And there's a few things that I could say about this, but the one thing that consistently sticks in my head about this is that it stinks.
Oh,
it's ridiculously bad smelling.
Now, okay, that's interesting. Are there any dishes in real life where the food it doesn't smell good or it doesn't look very presentable when you eat it? It's absolutely delicious. Anything comes to mind?
Yes, the first dish that actually came to mind is kimchi.
Ooh, yeah,
kimchi.
Yeah.
It's
kimchi, delicious.
It's fermented cabbage, but the reason why it's fermented is because it traditionally they stuck it in these clay jars and stuck it underground, and so in order to preserve it, it was that's where they kept it safe and where they kept it where you can actually eat it,
Right.
fermented. And so when I thought about what type of dish would be similar to the Billirat stew, I thought of a kimchi stew. Now, usually, I have not been able to eat a lot of kimchi.
It's typically a side dish, isn't it?
Well, not only that, but it's usually made with a fish sauce or an oyster sauce or like a shrimp sauce. And for those of you that don't know, I am allergic to seafood. So
Right. Don't touch it.
yeah,
I have taken Josh out to restaurants before. Where he's swore up and down that he's, the doctor said I'm not allergic. So he had himself some shrimp,
shrimp stew.
some camarones,
Yeah,
as it said in Spanish. It's a little bit of fish as well. And then next day he's just
Not good.
bubbling away. He's just percolating. It's like
Yeah.
that. It's like that scene in Dumb and Dumber when Harry's driving in the Lamborghini. He's smiling, and all of a sudden,
yeah.
and he's like, "Whoa, the toilet doesn't flush. I'm just shaving." So, okay, what does Wikipedia say about? What does the Star Wars Wiki say about it? About Billirat stew? How does it describe it?
So they describe it mainly as it's
You can quote it.
a green colored dish that was considered foul by most. So not foul in the way that you
Like
would
chicken
think.
fowl.
No.
Yeah.
Or duck. No, it's
Terrible
foul
pun.
in terms of
Terrible pun.
Yeah. And they would cook it and they would preserve it in these things called thermochurns. Basically similar to because kimchi is
It's
a
just
Korean
fermented.
dish.
Yeah.
And they kept it in these clay jars. Those thermochurns, I hope I'm sounding it out right, they would keep that in there for months at a time, and inevitably it would preserve it. So it would be fermented food as well.
Right.
So for a kimchi stew, for me...
By the way, this is really interesting. I didn't know that you could do that with kimchi. I always had it either as a side dish, like next to the main, like beef that I'm eating.
Yeah.
Or like when you go to some of those Korean taco trucks.
Yeah.
They'll put it instead of regular cabbage for like a carne asada taco.
Oh, they'll throw it on.
They'll throw it over like the pork.
Yeah.
And incredible, absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I've tried kimchi that was strictly like vegetarian or vegan, and it's not bad. But
Right.
the ones that I did try were mainly as like side dishes, like you said, or they were just to top a taco or whatever. But when I was sort of researching the different types of kimchi stews and soups and things, the main difference between a kimchi stew and a kimchi soup would be that with a soup, you would serve rice on the side, and you'd have a lot more liquid. But then if you had a stew, you would essentially serve it with the rice itself.
Like it's a lot thicker.
Yeah, so you just have a thick mess of
green,
stuff. green,
green
bad smelling stuff.
So now, kimchi stew. How would you serve something like that in your restaurant?
So, if I was doing a Mandalorian-esque sort of meal,
Sure.
I said, I'm taking my inspiration from the Mandalorians.
Mm-hmm.
I would serve it straight. I would throw a little bit of rice in it.
Right.
And I'd throw any sort of vegetables that I could find in it. Anything and everything I'd like to have in there. Obviously, you want it presentable, and so I would garnish with maybe some cilantro to add a little bit. I'd throw a lemon in there, but cilantro just to give it a little bit of brightness.
Right.
Because with a lot of different stuff, especially if you're going to throw in rice or potatoes, starchy things, you're not going to have a lot of brightness. It's going to be kind of dull. And
well, yeah, and plus you're going to want to have something. Okay, so obviously the smell factor and the green color might be a bit of a deterrent for new customers, new guests in your restaurant. So what type of steps would you do in order to try to entice people to try this new dish? Saying, other than just saying, what, it's delicious, you just got to trust me, I'm the chef.
No. I would actually embrace the bad smell, because when you look at foods like cheese is made with using mold. Mold in the case of cheese is a good thing. So in the case of kimchi, that smell means
that
something
fermented
good.
Smell.
Yeah, it's a good thing, because it's doing its natural process, rather than smelling bad just because it's off, or smelling bad because I didn't cook it right or something.
Right, left it out too long, whatever.
So I would actually embrace that bad smell. Obviously, it's not the best, but if I've always been of the idea that if you can impart a little bit of knowledge in terms of where this food came from, why it's made the way it's made, then there's another level of respect or another level of understanding that people get, and then when they get that, there's an entirely new taste for it.
Right.
So when if you go to a restaurant and you taste something and it's good, and you go home, great, you had a good meal. But if you go to a restaurant and these vegetables were picked just a few hours ago,
right,
and
the freshness, of quality about it, very unique.
And
scratch made.
Right. And I've had the pleasure of having sitting at a chef's table during my time when I was in culinary school. We got to sit at a chef's table during dinner service one night, and the chef came over and actually talked to us and sort of told us about some of the ingredients, told us about the cooking process. It was a great learning experience just being in culinary school, but it made that whole meal that much better, just sort of knowing, it was
having
cool.
having the context.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, understanding the art, understanding the process, and why a chef chooses one flavor combination over another.
Exactly. And so I think that would sort of overtake just it smelling bad.
Right. It would still make it presentable, right?
Now,
Now, I don't remember seeing anything in the expanded universe about rice per se, but I do remember them talking about root vegetables. So you get your carrot, potato type thing. Obviously, if they're brewing calf, then they have beans of some sort, and then tubers. So you're getting like the like mushrooms, things like that.
Yeah.
So now, again, not knowing ever seeing any specific reference to a rice, what other type of vegetable could a kimchi stew be served on top of or alongside? Vegetarian or not, that doesn't matter.
The first thing that comes to my mind is something like a lentil or...
Yeah.
Lentils are actually really good. Just a quick side note, when I was in culinary school, I was making lentils, and to garnish, we just did these caramelized onions just to put on top. And so one of the while I was caramelizing my onions, I was sitting there at the stove, saute,
right,
just getting those onions nice and caramelized. The chef that was teaching the class at that point came up behind me, and he poured, like, it must have been a cup of grenadine in my sauteed onion, and I was very, very close to being done.
Right.
And I was thinking, what'd you do to my sauteed onions?
Yeah.
Like, he's like,
who wants cherry flavored onions?
Exactly. And I looked at him. I'm like, what are you doing, chef?
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and he just said, trust me. I said, all right, you're grading me after this, so if it doesn't taste great, then that's
it's on you. Yeah.
But so the sauteed onions with grenadine is amazing, I gotta say.
Okay, well, you caramelize the onion, so it brings out the sweetness in it.
Right. But there's just an added sweetness to that I didn't know existed. I mean, obviously, grenadine is super sweet and super concentrated, so you would assume it would take you so over in terms of sweetness that it would just be terrible. Yeah,
cloyingly sweet. Yeah,
but it gets you to a point where it's not too much. It's to that point where you're like, this is what sweetness should be. This is the level it should be.
Well, hopefully one of these days, man, you're gonna have to make me some sautéed onions with grenadine in it.
Yeah,
because I'd love to try it. That sounds very interesting. It sounds weird.
It does, but it's awesome. It's great.
So now, anything else you want to talk about for the? Any last thoughts about the kimchi stew? No, I know we mentioned it, but what exactly goes in it besides? I mean, do you just buy store-bought kimchi and then you kind of boil it with water, or are you boiling it with like a white wine? How do you prepare the stock for a kimchi stew?
Well, for this,
and then what kind of thickening? Are you throwing like cornstarch in it to thicken it up, or are you just letting it like the vegetable part of it start to break down to thicken it naturally? What are we doing?
Yeah, generally the ingredients that you're going to throw in there. So you're going to have onion, you're going to have carrots, you're going to have celery, you're going to have
that what is that called? The mirepoix.
Mirepoix.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So that's your base for all your stocks and sauces and things, but. For this recipe that I was thinking of, I wanted to add pork shoulder to give it a since it's
Gamorrean shoulder.
Yeah.
He had it coming.
Exactly. Since we're going all vegetables with the kimchi being the cabbage and then everything else, I wanted to add some sort of protein in there because Mandalorians need protein.
Right.
And so pork shoulder was the first thing that came to mind simply because it's fatty but not too crazy in the way that all you taste is fat. But it's good in that it's really good braised. And so
braised is a process where you just stick it in the oven underneath the.
Basically, braising. What you do is you caramelize whatever you're going to braise.
So you're going to seal it on a stovetop on a nonstick pan,
right? Yeah. And those little bits of caramelization that you get on the bottom of that pan, you take wine, and you throw it in there so it breaks up those little bits of flavor.
Yeah.
And they're basically little bits of super concentrated flavor.
Little flavor nuggets.
Yeah. And so you throw that in with it. Then you throw your stock in with the protein or whatever you're braising.
Yeah.
And you cover it and you let it cook for as many hours as you want. The
slow cooking.
Low and slow, as many of you know, especially for barbecue. But for braising, usually you can do it from anywhere from like 250, 300 degrees to... I wouldn't go over like 400.
Right.
Just because you'd be cooking it off like crazy. But
it's funny that you mentioned barbecue because they have barbecue pits, and Boba Fett fell into a sarlacc pit. And I would imagine he would have rather been in a barbecue pit than a sarlacc pit.
Probably.
But although and with that, Disney announced that yes, even in their new canon, he survived. Okay. And that Dengar pulled him out. So they did keep
in the new
Disney canon. So they did keep that. But now, however, though, they are saying that this was their own idea, and that they're finally putting that rumor to rest. Meaning, so they are not taking the expanded universe storyline into account where. We already knew
they
that.
Are. Because it's in the expanded...
They're regurgitating what we already knew from the expanded universe, but now they're saying that it's brand new and that they're the first ones to think about it because they're awesome Disney.
Good for them.
Yes.
So back to the kimchi.
Right. Now,
stew.
Are you saying you'd want to use the braised pork shoulder in the kimchi stew, or would you prepare this some other way? Or is it like raw and you're dropping it in like pho or something like that?
No. With the kimchi, you're throwing it in with all the other vegetables. So basically, you're getting a pork shoulder braise with a kimchi, but I would throw in a bit more stock and...
Baxter Stockman?
Yes. Turtles. So it'd be more of a stew, because with the braise, you would take that particular product out. So if you were braising a pork shoulder, for example, you would take the pork shoulder out and you would plate it however you were plating it on whatever you were plating it on. But with this, I would keep everything that you cooked it with. And usually with the braise, you would either you would blitz it so you can make a sauce out of all that.
You'd blend it.
Yeah.
No, in an actual blender, or using one of those submersion blenders where you stick it into the pot?
Yeah, you would use like the Vitamix.
Okay, like a stand-up blender.
Yeah, so you would get a super concentrated, flavorful sauce.
Yeah.
But in this case, I wouldn't take anything out. I would just serve it as is.
Okay.
So that's where you get your stew.
So again, it's very rustic.
Yeah.
No, low on the glitz.
Right. When it comes to Mandalorians, it's considered almost like I would assume.
Well, this is basically saying ain't nobody got time for that. If you're gonna try to, they're not the pinky raisers.
No, because it's a waste of time, number one, and like you said, ain't nobody got time for that because hey, they got work to do. They've got to farm. They've got to work. They got to do this. They got to do that.
But now, okay, there are some Michelin star restaurants, like French restaurants, where the idea of rustic cuisine is one of the selling points, right?
Yeah, and I think that the term rustic
We're using it loosely.
Yeah, because everybody kind of has this different idea of what rustic actually means. Because, I mean, you might think of rustic as just being something from the country or
the countryside. Yeah.
Like when I think of rustic, I think of simplicity. That's the first word that comes to my mind. It's not necessarily stuff from an old period, or
you're not pulling it out of a Benjamin Franklin iron stove. Yeah.
Right.
You're letting the flavors speak for themselves.
Right. And I mean, one of my favorite chefs, if not my favorite chef, Marco Pierre White, he did an interview one time where he was talking about taking a tomato and just roasting it with a little bit of olive oil,
Delicious.
A little bit of salt. And he said, I would rather have that, coming from like an awesome farmer than this super huge, crazy,
right, like a Tesco.
And nothing against, like, especially with like Japanese cuisine.
Yeah,
you've got crazy, intricate, beautiful art in a way.
Yes,
and you're like, my gosh, like looking at it, how could a person do something like this? And so that's amazing in and of itself. But for me, the best sort of meal would be like that tomato. Because in movies like Ratatouille, and they kind of you go back to like your childhood and things like that. And
the nostalgia.
Yeah, and so for me, that's sort of that in that rustic vein.
Makes sense. So we've enjoyed our kimchi stew, and
we are enjoying our beer.
Yes.
Kind of holds up really, really nice. So far, I've not finished mine, but
I was reading some of the. How many ounces is this? This is 1 pint and an additional 6 ounces.
Nice.
So, no, it's not bad. It's really good. I was reading some of the pairings for this one, and they said you would put it with like a dark chocolate and raspberry cake. And actually, it said putting it with a chocolate stout cake.
Nice.
Which stouts and porters are my absolute favorite, and incorporating those into desserts is just wonderful. So I mean, there's something about chocolate and coffee together.
Yeah,
it just does it with like some sweet cream.
Similar to taking like a light lager and like pizza. It's just there are certain
pizza and beer, man.
Yeah,
pizza and beer.
Certain combos that you just can't beat.
Right.
But with that dessert. And coffee,
we had our meal. We had our big old bowl of stew.
Yeah.
With probably some sort of bread to soak up some of the juices.
Like the juice.
So, what are we having for dessert? I'm probably gonna have some more calf with that. I don't know if it's going to be spiced or not, but
I would say we don't have to have spiced calf.
Maybe for dinner we could put some spice from Kessel.
The spice, we could.
It's hallucinogenic narcotic spice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you'll really be in the expanded
Oh,
universe.
yeah. Your universe is expanded in multiple ways.
So
what are we having for dessert?
So for dessert, traditional Mandalorian dessert is called ooze cake.
Or ujali.
Yes.
Ujali.
Or everybody calls it ooze cake.
Ooze cake.
Even the Mandos, even. I was first introduced to this in the Republic Commando books.
Right.
The clones, and so just really, really quickly, because I don't want to take too much time, but the Republic Commando books are basically the ARC troopers in the Clone Wars.
Yes.
And they're like these super highly developed clones that were trained by these Mandalorians, and so essentially they took on the Mandalorian
kind of
persona and code,
yeah.
and so they became Mandalorians themselves. And one of the things that they remember most from their training is this ooze cake that Cal Scarata and their other instructors, or their other officers,
the other forgotten.
Yeah, they brought in this ooze cake and they loved it. Basically, it's a fruit cake.
Right, I was gonna say real dense.
It's super dense.
Yeah.
It's small. It's made with fruits and nuts, and you just mix all those together, and you just get this super crazy dense fruit cake. And I think, over the years, fruit cake has kind of gotten a bad rap.
Right, you always give it to your office part. The people at your office that you don't like.
Yeah, and fruitcake, when you take a little bit of time with it, is actually really delicious, and it's actually pretty good for you too. It's almost similar to like a Nutri-Grain bar or something, because it's got all these fruits and nuts and things.
Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have never had fruitcake. I've never even tried it. I've never had it. Over the years, when you go to family Christmas get-togethers, nobody has ever brought any. I don't even know if my wife's ever had it before. Fruitcake, maybe she has, but I've never had it, and I don't know if even my family members, my mom, my dad, anyone.
That's crazy. I mean, the few times that I have had it, it wasn't very good. Because
you hear there's that old the comedian Jim Gaffigan, where he's like, fruit good, cake good, fruit cake nasty crap. You take a bite. What is that? A Skittle?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's my perception of it.
Yeah.
Because I've never actually tasted it before. So we're doing some ooze cake, and I saw here that there's a special syrup, like a sweet syrup, that they drizzle over the ooze cake.
Yeah, for me,
that sounds really good, personally.
Yeah, and
like a coulis, I think is the term for it.
Yeah, you could, but I would do, depending on the fruits that you use in your fruit cake, I would do a sauce.
Sauce.
Because I'm the sauce boss.
That's right.
It all goes back to what your main ingredients are within the fruit cake itself. So if you have, let's say, you're mainly sticking with stone fruits. So your peaches and your plums and whatever else.
Yeah.
So you would make a sauce from like a plum or something like that. Or if you're doing the like berries, raspberries and strawberries and blueberries, etc., then you would do a strawberry sauce or a blueberry sauce or something like that. But fruitcake doesn't have to be this god-awful tasting thing. All it needs is a little bit of love, and you can make something really, really incredible. It's just like a regular cake.
Yeah. Again, this whole thing is utterly fascinating to me.
And one of the things though within the expanded universe books is with the ooze cake, it's like crazy sweet, and that's why those clone soldiers were like all up on it, because they're like, holy cow, this is a crazy amount of sugar. So
because then it's probably way different than the rations and the 3 meals that the Kaminoans are giving them.
And I mean, there was a story. There's a chapter in one of the Republic Commando books where they talk about Darman eating his rations.
Who is Darman?
Darman is one of the ARC troopers. He's one of the guys that he's the one that when we talked about earlier, he got married to that Jedi,
right?
Attained Mercan,
right?
And so he was talking about eating his rations because he was alone during this time. He was away from his unit, and he was eating his rations because he needed to, and they were tasteless.
Yeah.
And so
mass produced,
right?
Just like he was.
Exactly. And so the only reason that he had them was because they were for nutrients, and that was it, and to fill them up.
Like that weird paste that they have in the first Matrix movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like that gruel.
Yeah, that doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah. It's got enzymes.
Yeah, and so when he was eating these rations, he would put his mind back into those days of where he's eating that ooze cake with his with Captain Cal Scarata.
Yeah. And
he just remembered how crazy sweet it was, and so that part kind of always stuck out to me.
Well, I mean, but there's also the metaphorical aspect of it of being surrounded by people who look exactly like you, in uniforms that are exactly like yours, with weapons that are just exactly like yours. The stripping away of individuality that you see for any type of military, like you've seen in, especially for like say like Marines, where they teach you to even get rid of the word I. Yeah. So you'll say this soldier this, this soldier that, this soldier approves, this soldier is on duty.
Yeah, but the really great thing I think that Karen Traviss does with these books is she's able to create an individual with all those clone soldiers. Even though they all have the exact same DNA, they're brought up the exact same way, they did the same training, they did all this stuff the exact same way. There are still differences with all of those guys. And you had the funny one. You had
the Joker. You had the guy, the hard ass. You had the Ninja Turtles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would totally recommend reading these books.
Fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
Even though she killed Mara Jade, who was in my opinion the greatest Star Wars character, classic expanded universe or new Disney canon, she Donald Trumps them all. She Donald Trumps them all.
She's definitely one of my favorite characters. And
she's a redhead. Yeah, she's a redhead.
And I was sad to see her go.
Yes, it was very well written.
Yeah.
The way she did it was very well written. It was very sad. It tugged at the heartstrings, and it served a purpose. But still, it was horrible to see her go, and also the fact that they didn't tell Timothy Zahn that they were killing off his character.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the best way to handle it, but all right. But anyway, I can see what you're saying though, because again, you start to get into the metaphorical aspect of it, of again that sameness. So the sweetness factor of the ooze cake is gonna harken back to a time where he actually had a genuine feeling, as opposed to just being a warrior who's gonna go up against like a giant droid army. You're not gonna want to feel anything because they're trying to get the fear out of you.
Exactly.
And just fall every single move that you make should be well practiced because you rehearsed it and you drilled. And so because of the drilling nature, it's going to feel numb. Right. So you have this sweet ooze cake that reminds you of the heritage that you were cloned from. It's a metaphor for actually feeling a genuine feeling, if you want to get literary.
Yeah.
But anyway, so tell me about the modern equivalent that we would do. So we're in Vista's restaurant.
So I would do a fruitcake.
So this is Vista's during Christmas time.
Yes.
And we're doing a Christmas dessert.
Yeah.
And we're having our Netre Gall, chocolate stout, milk stout, and we have our dense fruitcake with some.
I would do a totally dense. I would do a very small portion because I'd want to pack as much flavor into as little as I could.
Yeah.
And having a Mandalorian meal, the dinner itself is going to be extremely filling.
I would imagine.
So you're not going to want, well, I'm assuming some people will, but most Mandalorians will. My wife would definitely want dessert, but
yes,
there in a restaurant I wouldn't serve a huge serving for a Mandalorian, but for a regular person, I would do maybe
Like some medallion size?
Yeah. Nothing too big, just something to basically get those flavors into the palate and to say, whoa, that's pretty good. Like,
right.
So it would be just a basic cake with fruit.
Fruits, nuts.
Yeah. And for a sauce, I would actually use the beer itself as a little bit of a base, for that sauce. So you would kind of tie that whole meal in together, and maybe even throw in a little bit of coffee too.
Yeah.
From that, from the calf that we had earlier in the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would imagine for a dessert like that, unless you're going to be having some sort of mulled wine or something, you'd probably have coffee or calf with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were even talking about this before. We can do probably a whole podcast just on Mandalorian.
Oh no, there will be a future episode where we touch upon a real life equivalent of all of the most popular Mandalorian alcohols.
Nice.
That has to be done.
And so we have to try every single one.
We'll do it live.
Yeah.
We'll do it live.
And so we have to take a shot or do a whatever. And
we will not be sober by the end of that episode. If we are sober by the end of that episode, then we did the episode wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel the burn.
Yeah.
So we went through a full typical Mandalorian meal.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the meal itself, or the whole day's meal, I should say?
I think that it makes sense for the breakfast. You want to get some nutrition in you so you can get out into the field or out into space as quickly as you can. Yeah. You're gonna do all that you can all day. Probably throw down some MREs, or you pull out a bit of that Jack's beef jerky.
Yeah.
Registered trademark. And then in the end of the day is when you're going to sit down all together and you're going to share your stories of all the experiences you had. You're going to have a big old bowl of stew or something real hearty that's going to fill you up. And then afterwards, a good Mandalorian protector has a bit of a sweet tooth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, family is a huge thing within the Mandalorian society. So,
right.
Like you said, sitting down to meal with your family is a huge part of your life as a Mandalorian, because, I've said certain words, at your wedding,
and at your own,
and at my own,
right.
Even though we're talking about stories from just sci-fi books and these
from the real Star Wars canon,
yeah. At the same time, these people and the way that they live their life definitely has spoken to me on a much deeper level than just, oh, this is a cool story and let's go beyond that. Agreed. And so, for me, it's the words Alit Orishia Taldin is, family is more than just bloodline. That has always been something that has sort of resonated with me. So family has always been a huge part of what the Mandalorian culture is all about. So having an awesome meal with your family, even though if it's a stinky kimchi
green stew,
yeah, or a hugely sweet, fruit cake, or
big old thick slice of cake,
ooge cake, or whatever, it's important to sit down with those people that you
care about.
Own. Yeah.
I gotta say, when reading through the Legacy of the Force series, some of my most favorite moments were when Jaina Solo was on the planet Mandalore.
Oh yeah.
And she's training with Boba Fett, and they sit down, and actually enjoy a meal. And you see even children walking around with little, like, a breastplate on. Or a blaster strapped to their side. Yeah, and then they're all sitting down together and enjoying a meal.
Yeah, and during this time within the canon of the whole universe, the Legacy of the Force takes place 50, 60, 70 years after Return of the Jedi. So you've got
it's about 40 something.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, Django. Not Django. What am I saying?
Boba's like nearing like 95.
No, he's like in his 70s, I want to
Is he?
say. Yeah. But
Well,
because he
he's
was
an old
dying.
man.
Yeah, he's an old man.
But he's Mandalore at this point. And so
He's Mandalore.
Mandalore, yeah.
Yeah.
So
He's
he is the
chief.
head of all the Mandalorians. And there's a scene, like you said, where he's sitting down with the meal.
Yeah.
And there's these little kids like poking at him and prodding him, and he's just sitting there like,
Calling him
yeah,
Babuir.
yeah. And so it's this great scene that I would strongly recommend these books because they're amazing. But
It's funny you say ARC troopers. I remember them as ARC troopers from the. There was that really. I'm not a fan. I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of the Clone Wars cartoon.
Yeah.
That had Ahsoka Tano in it.
Yeah.
But now before Revenge of the Sith came out, there was a series of mini episodes called the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And those fit in perfectly with the canon of the prequels.
Yeah.
And in that, it actually gets into a couple of really, really crazy mini-sodes of the ARC troopers and just how much of commandos and special forces they really are.
Yeah, there's a game too, or a couple of games.
Republic Commando.
Yeah, Republic Commando for PlayStation. Or is it?
I think it was
PC?
I think it was PS2. It was probably out on PC as well.
I mean, it was back in PS2 days, but
one of the voice actors who played one of the ARC troopers was the same guy who then voiced from Knights of the Old Republic. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Karth Onassi. He voiced in Knights of the Old Republic, and then which is a BioWare game in Star Wars universe. That same voice actor went on to voice Kaden Alenko from Mass Effect, in the Mass Effect series. Yeah, so that same guy. It was really, really cool hearing that voice actor kind of go along the way.
That's pretty cool.
Because I remember playing Republic Commando and thinking like, oh, this is pretty neat. And then you play Knights of the Old Republic and you're like, wait a minute, that's that same guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many directors do you know that end up using the same actors?
Oh yeah.
Like
Johnny Depp and Tim Burton.
or like Sam Jackson and
yeah. Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. Or Bruce Willis and M. Night.
Yeah.
We don't talk about M. Night.
So, yeah.
But anyway, so I think that was a really good meal, and that's enough to go out and put on armor that can stop a lightsaber, because it's Beskar.
Yes.
Mandalorian iron, which is an iron ore that is native to planet Mandalore and the moon above Mandalore. And that's going to work up quite a hunger.
Yeah, and only the Mandalorians know how to work this work this iron.
Right.
Which makes it very, very valuable within the expanded universe.
There's a hunger inside you. Remember that? The old Snickers commercials from the 90s?
Oh, yeah.
There's a hunger inside. Yeah.
So
I think that was pretty good.
Yeah. The next show.
Are we gonna head back to Westeros?
No, I think we should go into a different, whole different series.
Okay.
Harry Potter.
Sure, we could do Harry Potter. There's a few different dishes: treacle tarts and butterbeer.
That's one I'm interested.
Well, now that for those listening, we're in Los Angeles, so the Harry Potter Hogwarts experience just opened up at Universal Studios in LA. And you can actually go there and get several of those dishes, I believe. Yeah. Mainly you can go to get the butterbeer that you can try there.
So I think as for research for the next episode, we should...
You want to go to Universal Studios?
We need to. That's... Now we have to.
So we can actually see what it's like.
Yeah.
I've actually made treacle tart before, which for the book readers, anyone who's read the Harry Potter series will know that that's Harry's favorite dessert. It's made with a lot of breadcrumb and like a golden honey type of a syrup.
Yeah. Super,
super sweet. Put a little whipped cream on it, and oh yeah, there's a bunch of different recipes that you could pull from Harry Potter, like steak and kidney pie, all kinds of British stuff. So I think it's a good idea. So
Yeah.
okay, so we got to do our research. So I guess we're going to Universal Studios.
Sounds good to me.
That'll work. And so, of course, Josh will be paying for my ticket.
Yeah, usually.
Of
course.
Even though I have my own job and can easily afford my own way through, and he'll buy the ticket, and I won't even thank him.
That's fine.
So I'm gonna go ahead and thank you now.
All right.
I'll buy my own ticket, dude. It's fine.
I'll get it.
So until then, Expelliarmus.
Yeah.
Expecto Patronum.
The Dumbledore.
You know what you kind of sounded like right there? You almost sounded like, who's the guy from the Toydarian from episode 1? Only money. What are you, some kind of Jedi? Mind tricks don't work on me. Pizza pie. Pepperoni.
Boppity boppity.